Hey, everybody. How y'all doing? How's everybody doing? Right. So, I made a post on the Instagram. I think earlier this week or last week. I can't really remember. I've been going pretty hard. Like I said, I told y'all I had some things in the works. So I got a lot of things in the works. A lot of things in the works. So, made a post and I was talking about. Hey, how's it going? How's it going? Thank y'all for joining in. Thank y'all for joining in. So I made a post and I talked about, essentially effective communication. Why does it need to make sense, right? So I'll go back to the post really quick, just for those of you who aren't following the Instagram page on my YouTube channel. So some of you who aren't following that Instagram page, make sure that you follow the Instagram page, mentality_counseling. And those of you, click the link in the bio if you follow on Instagram, and make sure that you go like, comment, subscribe, and hit that notifications button on the YouTube. So the post that I got some controversy on and people wanted to hear a lot about was, not everyone thinks like you. What makes sense to you doesn't necessarily make sense to someone else. Communicate. Right. There's a mentality in itself that goes along with that. Right. There's a mentality in itself that goes along with that. Right. Some people think that, like, why does it need to make sense? Right. Why do I need to communicate? Why should I say more? They should already understand. They should already know what it is that I'm talking about. And for those of you who have dealt with this, or maybe you're that person, maybe you need to insightfully look at yourself and take some accountability. Maybe that's you. That's okay. We're going to work through that today. But I want you all to be interactive. I want you all to comment. I want you all to tell me if that is in fact you. What are some things? Maybe that was you. Maybe that was something you did in the past. Maybe that's something you don't do anymore. But not everyone thinks like you. Right. What makes sense to you doesn't necessarily make sense to someone else. Communicate. So I titled this, why does it need to make sense? Essentially, because there are a lot of people out there who feel like the other person should understand what it is that they're saying, and the other person should automatically do that. And that's not effective communication. And in fact, that's a very, very quite frankly, jacked up mentality to have, right? That's not a good mentality to have. That's not a place where you want to be when you're talking about being in a relationship, and whether that be a friendship, whatever type of relationship it is, that's certainly not a place where you want to be mentally, right? So your frame of reference, right? When we're talking about mentality, right? Remember, mentality is super, super critical to the way that you engage with other people. So we're talking about human beings being relational beings, right? Relating to other people, right? Needing other people in life. We can't be autonomous solely in life, right? We have to have other counterparts in our lives. So why does it need to make sense? And I'll answer that for you. The reason that it needs to make sense is simply because of what I just stated, right? We need other people in our lives, right? So we need other people to understand, right, our perspectives and where we're coming from, in order that they may stay in our lives, right? In order that they maintain their position in our lives, right? So for those of you who think that you don't need, right, someone else, right, that's just some other work that you've got to do, and that's another video, right? So when we're talking about this particular Throwback Thursday topic, that's something else we may get into later. The need for other people in your lives, right? That doesn't mean that you are solely dependent on that person necessarily. That doesn't mean that you are incapable of functioning without that person, but it is a necessity to have other people in your life, right? So all right, let's get to it. Like I said, the needing to make sense. So if that's your frame of reference, it doesn't need to make sense. They should understand me. They should already know what I'm talking about. Then you're probably a part of the issue in this particular situation or this particular relationship. So I just wanted to touch on that for a quick second. If your mentality is one that you feel you don't need to make sense to someone else, you don't need to explain your perspective to someone else, you don't need, right, to do any type of explanation. Yeah, it's a tunnel vision, right? And even taking it a step from that, it's not even necessarily tunnel vision as opposed to narcissism, right? That's when we start getting into what that word truly means, right? Because I see that word being thrown around a lot on these platforms, but that's when we get into, right, that self-consumption, right, not needing to explain yourself, right, to anyone else, because your way is the highway, right? Your way goes. These are true definitions of a controlling person. I hear people talking about being in controlling relationships and things like that, and calling people controlling, when the truth is that that's not really the case. I've had a lot of clients that I've worked with where they've called their partners controlling, and that really wasn't the case. It was just really their mentality was one that they felt like it was their way or the highway, and they weren't even able to see that in the relationship. Okay, that's honest of you to say that you had that issue in a relationship. I really feel like that's big of you to say that. I don't know if you're speaking in terms of yourself having that issue and you being that person, or if you were dealing with someone who is like that. Maybe you want to comment and clarify that. Strike the cool. So maybe you want to clarify that. I don't know if you're referring to you yourself having that issue, or you dealing with someone who had that particular issue with just having like your way or the highway. Okay, how you think you can work around that issue, like as far as being more understood or open to conversation. I think that truthfully, when you're talking about being understood, again, you have to, really evaluate the person that you're with. So I think if you're dealing with a person who is operating in that tunnel vision, as you say, or, narcissistic ways of thinking, and just my way or the highway. Now I did that to myself. I found myself after the relationship doing that. Right. Yeah. And so that's called gaslighting. So when somebody's making you doubt what you know to be true, that's gaslighting. That's the person gaslighting you, right? So they're making you doubt what you know to be true, and what you were doing right in the relationship, and second guessing the fact that you were doing those things that was right. So that person was gaslighting you, is what it sounds like. These are all really big issues in relationships. And if you're in a relationship like that, if that person isn't willing to do the work on themselves and willing to go to therapy and willing to invest in the relationship in those ways, it's good that you got out of a relationship like that, because truthfully, that's just so counterproductive. That's really maladaptive for you and your thinking. And what I mean by maladaptive is like you're not evolving in a healthy way, right? You're evolving in a way where, like you were saying, you found yourself after a relationship, like thinking that way or feeling like, hey, like it's my way to highway. So you kind of like had a response that was on the contrary to what you initially believed in the relationship to be true, and what you know in your heart that you value as a relationship should be. So if somebody's gaslighting you, if you're dealing with somebody who's at my way at the highway, or like I said, maybe you were that person yourself, that's okay. But if you have the insight, to be able to say, like, I grew from that, and whatever it is that made you grow from that, whether you did the work, you went to therapy, which is really good. I think that's like super beneficial and rare. But yeah, so if you don't need to make sense to somebody else, again, this is you. Like, you have to be able to communicate effectively. Remember, I talk about this all the time. People say communication is key, communication is king, communication is no, that's it's true in a very minute sense, because effective communication, I could talk all day long, but if you're not understanding me, right? If you're not understanding me, then it does no good. Okay, personally, I was the one being the issue. I just had past events that I struggle with and need to face, because let those emotions prioritize over hurt. Man, that's big. Man, that's big. So, brother, I'm telling you, like, that is huge that you were able to like see that. Again, and sometimes I want to say this too, because like in this situation, if you're not with that person anymore, that's okay. Maybe you lost a good person, you recognize that, that's all right. But the real big thing here that I want to point out with you is that you were able to see that, grow past that, move right forward, and progressively work on yourself and work on those issues that you noticed that made you maybe lose that person. All the same, the positive perspective in this, y'all know that I like to look at things positively, is that you're bettering yourself for the next person, right? So that person still wasn't for you at the end of the day. Might have been a good person. It's not taking anything away from her. It's certainly not taking anything away from you because you did the work on yourself. So when you grow in these situations, remember, allowing yourself to let go of that too is a huge part of the growth, right? So you now excelled, right, past your former self into a place where now you're able to grow, you're able to be right in what you need to be for the next person. So you're coming close. Remember, I always say, like, we want to be 100% whole or close to it before we move to the next situation. So what it sounds like, man, if you haven't already met that person, you've now worked on yourself so that you can be the best version of yourself in that relationship with the person that maybe you haven't met yet. So I think that that's good. I think that that's really growth. And being able to look at that and change your mentality, remember, because mentality dictates the way that you think. Your thinking dictates your actions, behavior, and words, right? Your words, actions, and behavior dictate your beliefs, right? What you believe to be true or what you believe in, right? And then those beliefs dictate your reality, right? So that's the reality in which you live in. So mentality, thinking, actions, behaviors, words, beliefs, and reality. And you change your reality by looking at the way that you think and looking at your mentality, right? Your mentality is your frame of reference, not your thinking. Your mentality dictates your thinking. So that's cool. I really, really appreciate you even just chiming in and sharing that perspective, because it takes a big person to even admit what you said here and just really looking at that. And the fact that you pulled yourself out of that too, I think is even bigger, right? Because that's insight and accountability. And that's super, super huge. And this is a part of what this post is about. So why does it need to make sense? Well, you got to have some insight first off, right? You got to have some insight. If you don't have any insight to the fact that you even have a problem, remember, I always say there's no room for you to even fix it. There's no room for you to fix it. So if you don't have the insight, without the insight, there's no room for growth. There's no room for change. There's no room for growth or change. There's no room for evolution. There's no room to put yourself in the position, right, to be the better version of yourself, to be as close to that 100% whole or 100% whole yourself. So if you don't have the insight, you don't have the accountability. And without the accountability, right, the accountability for change, nothing happens. Nothing moves forward. So that's big. So when we're talking about why does it need to make sense, it needs to make sense because if you want to be in a productive, right, effectively communicative relationship with another person, you need to help them understand what it is that you're trying to convey. If you have feelings that you feel like that aren't being heard, right? How else might you expect someone? Maybe it's you. Maybe it's the way that you're communicating. Maybe you aren't communicating effectively, right? And then that's where the insight and accountability piece comes in, right? It's not a matter of blaming. I want to be really, really, diligent in making that point, because a lot of times what I see in relationships is it's like a blame game, right? We're throwing the ball back and forth, right? We're playing tennis, right? So we're back and forth, right? We're ping ponging the thing. We're ping ponging the blame, right? No, you did this, or I only did this because does it really matter? At the end of the day, which hill are you willing to die on? That's a question that I ask a lot of couples oftentimes. What hill are you willing to die on, right? Is this really worth the struggle, the fight, and the effort and energy that I'm going to put into the problem, or am I going to be a part of the solution? Am I going to be solution focused or problem centered? Am I going to be solution focused or problem centered? No, I mean, you're welcome, man. I mean, you did the work. You did the work because, I mean, everything that you talked about was an insight and accountability. So, yeah, the priorities was very much on my side. I wasn't taking the time to try to understand I had issues. Yeah, man, that's big, brother. Like, I'm telling you, like, when I hear people say things like you're saying right now, that's one of the biggest reasons why I do what I do. That's one of the biggest reasons why I do what I do, is because you made yourself a priority. See, a lot of times that selfishness can be productive, just like in this case. You were hearing it, right? You were hearing it. It sounds like you need to work on these things. You need to work on these things. Maybe you weren't. Maybe it was just like, you know what? I keep coming into this issue. Maybe I'm the problem. Maybe I'm the problem. Maybe I need to look at that. Being a problem isn't always a bad thing. It's what you do with it. It's what you do with that knowledge, right? Insight and accountability. What you do with that knowledge and understanding that you have the issues that you have, then you can come and join that with the counterpart in a relationship to be able to effectively and productively and positively move forward. Being one another's piece is a part of this process. You can't get there, right? You can't get there without the insight and accountability. Prioritizing yourself in the relationship for productivity of the relationship overall is important. Now, if you got somebody, remember, like I said, it depends on who you're working with. It depends on who you got in this relationship. Sometimes you may need to step away, right? If you got somebody who isn't willing to receive that, who isn't willing to put forth a positive effort and energy just as you are in the relationship, you need to get out. You need to get out. I talk about this also with a lot of my clients. If you got some, like, say if you're going on a first date with somebody and you're talking about these things, these non-negotiables that I always talk about, right? These compromises that I always talk about, right? These needs and wants that I always talk about, right? This is a 3-part list. You got needs and wants, you got compromises straight down the middle, and you got non-negotiables, things I will not tolerate, things that will run me off, things that I know I am not willing to put up with in a relationship. These things need to be reasonable. These things need to be within reason, right? However, you need to make these lists. These are things you need to be talking about on first dates. These are things you need to be talking about within the first 3 months if you can get to know these people, right? And if these people aren't meeting, right? These people aren't meeting these requirements, these standards that you have for yourself and what you hope to achieve and attain in a relationship, you need to part ways. You're doing yourself both a disservice, damage, and you're wasting time. The inevitable will come to fruition. I've seen it too many times. 14 years in May. I'll be doing this. 14 years in this field. It's inevitable that it will happen. So when we're talking about, right, not everyone thinks like you, that's so true. That's so true. Not everyone will think like you, right? Not everyone will think like you. But the key component is that person worth investing my time into to get them to understand my perspective? Are they willing to understand my perspective? See, effective communication happens in so many ways. Effective communication happens with willingness, compromise, verbal, right? Verbal output, because you actually need to be talking, right? You actually need to be saying words and communicating, right? So with those things, and then you have trust, right? You have understanding and listening, active listening, not listening to respond, right? You can't do both. I don't care what anybody says, you can't do both. In a relationship, you must be listening actively to what the person is saying, listening to understand, right? Listening to understand, not listening to speak, not listening defensively, because there is defensive listening that happens oftentimes in relationships. You hear something that you might not necessarily agree with, you might not necessarily, like, right? Or you may feel as though it was an attack on your character. The most appropriate and effective thing to do when you feel like those things, those attacks are coming, or those responses are making you defensive, is to talk about that. It's to say, hey, I really didn't like what it was that you said about this, but I still allowed you to finish, right? Because you don't interrupt. Yeah, I still allowed you to finish. And the issue that I have with that is, right? So you convey, right? You give an explanation to the feelings, right? That may involve some insight and accountability on your part. Maybe it's something that you need to work through. Maybe it's a past issue, a past trauma, right? We're talking about Throwback Thursday, right? This is how those things can come up in current situations and relationships. And if you are 100% whole or close to it, this is where that will come out. So you can effectively listen, right? Actively listen in a relationship because you yourself haven't worked through the trauma and dealt with the things necessary in that relationship, right? For you to effectively communicate, for you to provide a trusting, right, environment for that person to convey their thoughts and their feelings to you. So this is why these things are so critical in relationships. So when we're talking about not everyone thinks like you've got to be willing to understand that. You've got to be willing to accept the disagreements. You've got to be willing to accept the perspectives and the differences of those perspectives, right? You can't be ready and willing to attack at any moment, to pounce on any indiscrepancy in anything. You have to look at yourself. You have to have insight and accountability to what those things are within you that are making you respond that way, that are making you respond defensively, right? So it needs to make sense to your partner, because if that person is if that person is willing, right, and that person is worthy of the investment of that time, you have to also do the work. It isn't solely that person's responsibility to understand you. You have to do some explanation. You have to actively try. You have to actively, right, allow them the understanding. You have to give them the information. You have to maybe reframe, right? So maybe you're expressing something, but you aren't doing so effectively. So that person doesn't quite understand what it is that you're saying. This is where those things come into play. So then what makes sense to you doesn't necessarily make sense to someone else. That was the second part of this, right? So not everyone thinks like you. What makes sense to you doesn't necessarily make sense to someone else. Again, there are disagreements. But if we're listening to understand and we're communicating effectively, right? We're communicating to effectively convey the message, our feelings, our thoughts, right? Then it doesn't involve the argumentative, right? The argumentative, problem-centered responses, defensiveness, right? It doesn't involve that. Instead, it's solution focused. It's not problem centered, it's solution focused. If we focus on the solutions, how do we get past this? Have you ever had someone in your relationship ask you, how do we get past this? What is it that I can do to make you feel secure with that, right? And you to be able to effectively convey. Because if you have the person that asks you those questions, right, and you can effectively convey your thoughts and your feelings and express what it is that you need, right, needs and wants, compromises, non-negotiables. If you don't know what those things are on your list, how do you expect that person to understand what those things are, much less fulfill them? Right? So that's what we're talking about. So you have a role, right? Insight and accountability. This is where the accountability piece comes in. You're accountable also for then the destruction. You're accountable also for the lacking of those needs fulfilled. Yes, you are then responsible for the lacking of those needs fulfilled. That's why it needs to make sense. Communicate. That was the last part of that post. So not everyone thinks like you. What makes sense to you doesn't necessarily make sense to someone else. Communicate. But I always like to add effectively. Without effectiveness, communication is futile. Words alone are futile, right? Without context, they're futile. That's why you need to be able to explain, convey, express what those feelings are, what they mean to you, why they're important, and why you need them, right? Why do I need these things? When you did this, it made me feel, what do I need to do to fix it? Well, I need this. So you need to be able to effectively convey that, because when you don't do this, I feel that. You then, in turn, need to also express, where was it the breakdown in communication happened with what I needed from you that made you respond that way? See, it's not just a one-way street. Again, remember, it's not just a one-way street. In any breakdown in communication, you are also at fault. That's why I said there's no ping pong in this thing. There's no tennis match. There's no throwing and shifting the blame. You, as well as your partner, are to blame for the issue. Both people, both parties. Insight, accountability, understanding, active listening, trust, effective communication. It won't always make sense. It won't always be perfect. But if both of you are willing always to put in the work and to do the work effectively and communicate, I assure you, nothing is definitive, but you have a better chance at most people at making your relationship work. That's my 2 cents on that. I know a lot of people wanted to hear on this topic. If you didn't get a chance to catch the live, maybe you were busy, maybe you were at work, definitely make sure, tell a friend, go watch it, YouTube or Instagram, Mentality_Counseling on Instagram. That YouTube link is in the bio on Instagram. Mentality Counseling is the page. Go like, comment, subscribe, share. Make sure that you guys sharing, hitting that notification button so that you know when I'm going live. I really, really appreciate everyone who tuned in, everyone who commented. I cannot stress enough. I appreciate the love. I appreciate the support. Everybody that's out there watching and everybody that will watch. Make sure that you share this, tell a friend, go and watch it. Maybe it'll help somebody. I wanted to do a shout out real quick too. I got my God Apparel on. So got some cool gear. Y'all go and follow God Apparel at God Apparel LLC on Instagram. Just got some great products. Really, really appreciate them giving me this. And, it's just some real cool gear. They got jogging suits, sunglasses, things for the ladies, things for the men. Y'all go and check out God Apparel. It's cool. Got some good gear. So go check out their page. They got some real cool graphics too. I really, really like what they're doing over there on that Instagram page with the graphics. So y'all go and follow God Apparel. And like I said, I really, really appreciate God Apparel, you sending me that gear. Keep showing the love on the page. You real big supporter, and I am in turn grateful and a big supporter of your page as well. So I hope that this helps somebody. I really, really appreciate everybody, like I said, for tuning in. So I will catch y'all later. I'm about to get some much needed rest. Like I said, I got a lot of things in the works. So y'all make sure that y'all still stay tuned. Go and tell a friend, make sure that they follow the page. Also, for those of you who have not reached out or where, I also now have the booking link as well for my Instagram. On my Instagram page, there's the ability to book now. It'll take you directly to my booking service so that you can then book you a consultation. I require those for anybody that I meet. It's super important for us to be able to get to know each other, to build rapport, to figure out what are some specific issues that you may have or what brings you to therapy. It's just a small fee of $20. We talk for about 15 minutes actually. And, we spend some time getting to know each other. So make sure that you go in, you book that consultation, get a chance to speak with me. It could be for something short. I also offer coaching sessions as well, consultations for businesses, resumes, jobs, you name it. I can get you there, but you have to do the work. I'm a real big proponent of you doing the work, investing in you, and I will invest in you as well. So reach out to me. Like I said, the booking link is in the bio with the Instagram. So you can go directly to my booking page and you can book you a session with me privately. So I really enjoyed y'all. Y'all make sure that y'all have a good night and get some rest. Peace, love. I'll see y'all later.